This is Coffee with Kelly, a dynamic podcast that's dedicated to driving positive change in school safety. I'm your host, Ethan Woodman, Product Marketing Specialist for Crisis Go, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Kelly Moore, Senior School Safety Specialist for Crisis Go. Our mission is to empower you with essential knowledge, tools, and inspiration required to foster a safer and more secure school environment. We hope this podcast will be the catalyst for transformation in your schools. Join us as we continue to dive into the world of school safety. Good morning, Kelly and Chad and Claude.
Good morning.
Are we ready for this?
Yeah, we are. Where's Claude and Chad from? Why are we talking to them today?
They are from ZeroEyes.
Awesome.
ZeroEyes is a gun detection with human verification. Pretty cool stuff.
Pretty cool stuff. Why don't you guys introduce yourself? Claude, why don't you go first?
Hey, Kelly. Hey, Ethan. Claude Haskins, ZeroEyes, Vice President of Partnerships. We work with Crisis Go through partnerships, so thank you for having us on Coffee with Kelly this morning. We're excited to be here. Prior to myself getting to ZeroEyes, I spent 13 years in the SEAL teams before getting out. Last 8 years were in corporate, different sales, partnerships roles. And lucky enough to come to ZeroEyes about a year and a half ago to help stand up the partnership program. Lucky enough to have Chad come on the team, which I'll kick it over to Chad here.
Yeah, I'm Chad Spiller, the Director of Partnerships at ZeroEyes. I've been with the company for about a year now, actually. It's crazy how time flies, but I joined during a transition program out of the Navy. So I spent the last 8-9 years in the SEAL teams and got linked up with ZeroEyes on the back end of that. Worked with ZeroEyes for a few months. The company has a great track record in bringing on former military law enforcement, providing them with that next mission. So I ended up coming to the company and got linked up with Claude and have been working on in the partner space ever since. So cool. Really excited to be here. The first partner event that I attended was with you guys at Crisis Go. So nice. Very excited to do this podcast, and I feel like I can finally earn the mug that I was given at that event of Coffee with Kelly.
Yes.
Well, we give them away. But you earned yours.
I think Claude has a Coffee with Kelly t-shirt.
I do. My daughter wears it to bed often, so she awesome. I do listen to it.
Is it the green one?
Yeah.
It's
the green one.
Yeah.
This is so funny.
She loves it. She thinks she's promoting school safety, and it's awesome.
It's awesome, right? Everyone needs to do that. That's cool. Ethan, you have
Kelly?
something to say? Let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. Let's do that.
Yeah. So obviously, with ZeroEyes being an AI gun detection, that's going to be our basically the format here is let's talk about AI and what does AI mean to you? Should we be scared of it? Should we use it? Should we totally rely on it? Kind of all those questions. It's kind of a hot topic, especially around the school safety.
Let's talk a little bit before we do that. I apologize. What exactly ZeroEyes does?
Yeah, let's do it.
What's their niche in this whole mess that we call school safety?
Yeah, I can jump in and fill that in. I actually have a good way, I think, of addressing both of those. And it's just kind of covering down on why ZeroEyes was started, going over the founding story. It's still the fabric of who we are today, but it also frames out the problem and the solution utilizing AI. So the company was started back in 2018. It was in the wake of the Parkland shooting in Florida. Schools began doing more lockdown drills, and our CEO's daughter came home from school after doing one of those lockdown drills. She was shaken up and she was wondering, hey, Dad, is someone going to come to my school with the gun, shoot it up like they do these other ones. A few days later, he was at a sporting event. I think it was a practice at the school, and he bumped into the SRO, and he just pretty much asked him, "What do you guys do for your lockdown procedures, your active shooter drills? Like, what's the actual procedures that you do?" And they went through them, and then Mike looked around. He saw the cameras everywhere, every 20 feet in the parking lots, in the hallways, and he just asked a simple question: "Who's looking at these, and what are they used for?" And the answer was, I think, synonymous with what is all over the place, is that they're not really being used for anything. It's no one's watching them, and it's really for after the fact forensic evidence only. So looking at if a fight took place, wanting to go back and see that. And we see it oftentimes in the case of any gun related incident in schools, whether that's an active shooter event or just an escalation of a fight, whatever it is. I mean, you go back and you roll the tapes and you see what happened. His idea was simple. How can we leverage that existing camera infrastructure, which, if you look, they're everywhere. There's cameras in all different schools, places of business. But what are they being used for? And who's watching them? So when you look at that problem of, even if you have somebody looking at cameras, they're looking at dozens or hundreds of camera feeds. They're on a switch. They're timer. They're small. It's challenging to be able to watch every single one of these frames and look at the hands of every single person in them to see if is there a gun or is there not a gun. So and I guess, Ethan, and starting off with that question, like, what is AI good for? And I think that we were talking about this earlier. It's not a solution to every problem by any means, but it has places that it fits very well. And I think that what ZeroEyes did is that we put that AI in a place where it can serve a purpose and fit very well, in the sense of monitoring every single one of those video feeds better than a human could. Because it doesn't take breaks. It doesn't need to check its phone. It doesn't need to go to the bathroom. It doesn't have problems outside of what its main task is. So it does that very well. And so we plug AI in there, but then we also pair it with a human in the loop. We don't let AI just run by itself. It has an important factor, but with how ZeroEyes works, we use AI on site, looking at existing camera feeds for a brandished firearm. Once the AI gets a detection of what it thinks this is a firearm, it sends just that keyframe image out to our, we call them ZOCs, ZeroEyes Operation Centers. We have one in Philadelphia and one in Hawaii. They're a huge part of who we are and how our company functions, because we staff those with former military and law enforcement veterans only. So whenever the AI makes a detection of a gun, it gets sent immediately to the ZOC, where we get our analysts they take their eyes, they look at it and say, really answer two questions. Is this a gun? Is this not a gun? Is this a threat? Is this not a threat? And then they dispatch the information accordingly, both to the school or end user, whoever that may be, on the ground, as well as the local law enforcement simultaneously, letting them know, I think, three key pieces of information. One, this event is happening. Hopefully this is proactive, what we call left of bang, before the first shot is fired, before the person with the gun is in the building. Secondly, it passes a image of the shooter. So everybody knows exactly who the shooter is. You have a good description to go off of. And then also where that shooter is. It's very important, especially when you get to larger campuses or buildings. If you're responding or dealing with a situation on the ground, knowing exactly where that threat is within the building. So that's, in a nutshell, what ZeroEyes is.
It's pretty powerful stuff. Like the fact that we're taking cameras that for years have always just been that investigative part. Now we're making them like a proactive tool. I think that's like one of the most powerful parts of this.
So that
for sure.
That also goes to some of the the discussion we had earlier about people that are looking for the answer, not a series of systems and an ecosystem, but they're looking at an answer. Early on, security was, you need a camera. You need a camera. And it's going to deter people and so forth. And I always tell people it doesn't deter anybody. Everyone understands the functionality of a camera. If it were a deterrent, we would no longer have any armed robberies at banks, right?
That's true.
And so, and it really is looking after, Chad mentioned left of bang. It actually addresses right of bang after the incident has been triggered and initiated. And when we start looking at, and this was, it was actually a conversation as we were becoming partners and creating that relationship. This was an aha moment for me. And we've talked about the pathway to violence and what it takes to for a shooter to become a shooter, and all the grievance and preparation and all of that stuff. And when we're talking about the steps within that pathway, we're typically told about 5 or 6 steps. But there's so many other steps in between each of those 5, what I call macro steps. And this was one of those conversations that we had with ZeroEyes. And when we start talking about when just prior to the actual act of shooting, there are so many steps that we have the potential for catching somebody who is in that process, right? And we use left of bang, we use bang, but as the incident, the attack, right? But even that attack starts when somebody, for me, that attack is starting as soon as they fill their bag up. They're they're collecting all of their ammunition. They're getting ready to go, and they leave their house, right? That attack has started. So, and the specific conversation that we had was when ZeroEyes was giving us a demonstration based upon the Covenant shooting in Nashville. And had we had ZeroEyes in that incident, recognizing the firearm when it first came out, and when it was first recognized as a firearm, and forgive me if I get this wrong, but we're talking about 30, 40 seconds prior to the actual shooting into the windows to gain access. And all of us would love an extra 30, 40 seconds to send an alert, right? So tell us a little bit about that, Claude or Chad, and why that's so important to us.
Yeah, I'll kind of take this one, Chad, if you don't mind, because this is when I first came to ZeroEyes and kind of learning more about active shooter scenarios and how they play out. A statistic that kind of stood out to me is on average a weapon is displayed or shown on camera 70% of the time before a shot is fired. And being a proactive solution and utilizing cameras to be proactive, you can get ahead of these incidents and get law enforcement, get SROs, get security that's on site to those locations where that shooter is, and hopefully make an impact before those scenarios play out. Just like in Parkland, that shooter was in a stairwell underneath a camera, loading his weapon for about 30 to 45 seconds as well before he went out and pulled a fire alarm to allow kids to start coming out and start shooting. So, to your point exactly, Kelly, if we can see that earlier and start that alert process, we can save time to save lives.
And I agree with Claude. I mean, if you look at what we're trying to do is two things. It's proactivity and situational awareness. And I think we can all agree that 30 seconds in a gunfight is a lifetime. So
Yeah.
much can happen. So, and just understanding, and we're very hesitant to say, had we been installed, this would have been the case or this would have happened, but we're not on the ground. We can never directly stop anything. However, generally, when you look at case studies or where there's opportunity to fit in, and you had brought up the Covenant one, that, and you look at that, it's like she walked to the door with the gun out, obviously, when she shot out the front door. But the next step of the problem was that it was, I think, 2 or 3 minutes from when she shot out the front door to when the first 911 call went out. And I think that's because people in the room are responding with a human response, which is, I need to get myself to cover. I need to get my kids to cover. And then when you're in a position like that, then it's, I'm going to get on the horn and call 911, call for help. So the goal is, like, even after that shot's fired, there's still time that can be bought back. And then the situational awareness as well. When I like to call it that pre-dispatch information to law enforcement. When they show up to the scene, I thought that they did a great job at Covenant, given the information that they had. They got in there, they cleared the building and found and worked their way up to the shooter. But our goal is for them to know exactly where that shooter is in the building, so they can send that fireball right up to that location.
Yeah, and from some processes, humans, and you guys understand the reactionary gap concept, when you see something and you react to it. And so oftentimes, if you want a quick response to something, you have to have experience, trained for it, go through all of those processes to decrease that reactionary gap. And part of that is most of our schools have a difficult time recognizing shots being fired as shots being fired. And they try to kind of rationalize, that doesn't happen here. That's not what's happening, right? So when we say, and we identify that weapon early, and we understand that we're now dealing with a gun, and we start making those alerts and those connections to law enforcement, your safety teams, we're sending, and that's where this partnership really works well, is when that alert goes out, it also alerts through Crisis Go, and everyone is moving, and everyone's getting to what I call an emergency protective action, in this case, a lockdown. And that's where we are looking at getting everyone in. At the same time, we're notifying law enforcement so that they understand the whole process, right? And they have that pre-incident information that Chad was talking about. But it's reducing that reactionary gap for people, because now they don't have to think through that. This is a gun. We verified that it's a gun, and now what you're hearing is shots fired. So start moving. But this goes to, and we can address this in both instances with the Parkland shooting and the Covenant shooting, so we understand. And this goes back to those little micro steps. Many times we're looking at schools that protect the interior more than the perimeter, especially with cameras. How far out do they go? Where do you put those? Are they outward facing? Are they inward facing? Are they looking at who's coming in, or are they looking at parking lots or the street across from the school? Those types of things. And when we're talking about this type of technology, and we look at, are you guys familiar with the concentric circle kind of security plan, where you look at whatever or whomever it is that you're protecting is in the innermost circle, and then you start getting out, and the further ring that you go out, the more you shift from protection to early warning. And I think this is where schools are going to need to shift a little bit from working through that interior to working out to early warning, so a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's looking at the tiers of security, your layers of security. I think, and I agree. I understand those concentric rings, that innermost focusing on hardening. I think I see the innermost, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is those hardening
Yep.
features, looking
Yep.
at access control and various types of hardening structures like that. So the next one out is, I think, that middle layer where I think where we fit in. And then I see the most outer ring, and really the most important is that, what you touched on earlier, proactivity of actually before an event even starts. How can we stop a problem before it becomes an actual problem? And that's that early identification and intervention. Like, I think that's part of the concentric rings of security. It shouldn't just be how do we create a moat around our castle. It's how can we support
Right.
the people here. And I think that's that first line of defense.
Just to kind of add to what Chad was saying, there, like when we look at the 271 instances was the most amount of active shooter situations that have taken place in any singular year, from January 2020 or January 23 to October 23. Only out of those 271, 50 of those active shooter scenarios never entered the building. So if we look at hardening, as we're talking about the exterior, even through partnerships with Evalon and different cameras, as cameras are getting better, we're getting detections at out to 1,000 yards. Which, if you an average human walking 100 yards, how long that takes you? Let's just say 10 seconds. But if we can get those detections and continue pushing those alerts farther and farther away from what we're trying to protect, then we will be we'll be a lot more successful in the amount of time giving to the response getting there.
Right. Yeah. And 100% agree with that, because Ethan and I have talked ad nauseum about where are we most vulnerable, right? As a school campus, those places that, from my perspective, are outside of your security ring, right? Where you have to enter into through your security process, your access control, your drop off, anywhere where there's a choke point and people have to be funneled in. So when we're talking about vulnerability and needing the early warning and so forth, we're talking about sporting events, after school events where most people are, I don't want to say strangers to the school, but they're not everyday occupants of that school, right? And so now you're searching or you're trying to make sure that nobody's bringing stuff into a sporting event or whatever. So that takes time, and that's where, if you're really looking at securing your campus, you need to step that out a little bit. But we did talk about AI and AI being the buzzword today, and how AI is infiltrating just about every aspect of what it is that not only we do in the safety realm, but what we do in society. And when we start talking about AI, I think there's one big factor that, and both Chad and Claude touched on this, but I want to delve into it a little bit more because I see our industry headed this way, and I want to caution people, is AI as it sits today still needs verification. It is not the answer. It'll point you in the right direction or not, but you have to verify it. And because I see this going into threat assessment. I see this going into behavioral intervention and so forth. You guys want to address that for us?
Happy to. I jump in here. We've developed our data set internally. Customers is very important. We get asked all the time, can you do blades? Can you do knives? How many things appear to be a knife or a weapon for that matter with a cell phone or hands hold, the positioning, the color. AI is in my opinion, never going to be perfect and is always going to need someone in the middle to be able to provide that context and situational awareness to the end user, because a computer can't tell the difference of a straight line of a pen or a knife, especially at least not now, or nor do I think it will be able to in the future. But if it does, then that may change. But
a quick thing that comes to mind for me is when we often get asked, like, what is your false positive rate? And I start off by talking about how the people who built our AI, our team, where they do it in Philadelphia in our green screen facility with real replicas of guns on real video cameras, how they build that, they're rock stars. But there are false positives. And the reason that is the way we structure the company, the way we do with the ZeroEyes Operations Center, the ZOCs, we're not false positive averse. I think that if you try and remove that human in the loop, you then are in a position to where I don't want a false positive, because any false positive is going to get dispatched directly to the customer and law enforcement. And it turns into a little bit of that car alarm scenario. Like I have 4 kids. If I hear my car alarm going off in my driveway on any given afternoon, I'm reaching for my keys and trying to hit the unlock button to just make it turn off, because I know that someone's not breaking into my car. It's my kids doing it because they do it often. So how repetitive that is creates a car alarm experience, I think, if you were to be dispatching alerts of firearms. So having the ZOC in the loop, that human in the loop, and our analyst, it allows us to run very sensitive algorithms to where we're not false positive averse. We welcome false positives because it allows us to turn up that sensitivity. So it makes it a lot harder for the AI to miss an actual detection. So we turn up the sensitivity, and then we lean on the ZOC or those analysts to be able to weed out all those false positives. But it's key. It's paramount to have them in the loop. The AI is not. It also doesn't understand context of law enforcement detections. So if there's ROTC or color guard, like the AI doesn't understand that context. It sees a firearm and it says that's a gun. So whereas humans understand that context a lot better. So we pair the two.
And you both touched on the important part that is so difficult for AI to do, and that's context, right? It's placing the context of the alert. And I know I think we've talked about this previous to this, but I do think there are requests from customers or potential customers. How do we stop before the gun is even brought out, right? Suspicious activity, aggressive activity. And can we put AI over the camera to alert on that? And can we push that into what we're doing today to prevent this from that gun ever being pulled out?
That's tough.
Kelly, I think there's some technologies today that are doing behavioral and are even doing screening of text for psychological, pre-indicators. Our company and ZeroEyes and how we chose to go to market was to not do behavioral, to not monitor the cameras. We're completely FERPA compliant. So, and also we decided to go all in, like Chad said earlier, inch wide, mile deep. We went all in on building an algorithm to detect weapons and the process of how to interject and intervene in that situation. So, but then we do partner with other companies that are doing other solutions. We can't, like I think Chad, as he said, we're not the end all be all solution to every scenario. There's a lot of companies that are trying to solve for a lot of things. We just chose not to monitor the cameras live for.
And I do think it runs that line of, and this is up to the schools of, I mean, privacy. People are, I think, rightfully cautious of AI. Like, what exactly is it looking at? What exactly is it doing with my information? And I think that's especially true for our kids in schools, protecting their information, their privacy, and just making sure it removes any bias or any type of biological marker. And so that with how we, and what Claude mentioned, went to market is we wanted to try and stay out of that realm of we want to position ourselves as being, we're not trying to invade privacy. And in that regard, we are focused on that object recognition and that object is a firearm. It doesn't matter the setting, the person that pulls it out, it doesn't track any of that or register any of that. It's only looking for that firearm. So we built it that way and took that position really just to focus on privacy concerns, as I think AI is storming into our lives. And for good or bad, we're still working out where exactly that fits and how to use it, I think.
Yeah, and we're behind, and where I was going, and I wasn't suggesting that you guys should do this, but it's very difficult for the context to be monitored when you have middle school kids wrestling in the hallway, or play fighting or whatever, and they're just kids being kids, and as opposed to adding an aggressive or a suspicious. Suspicious is a term that is subjective and defined by an individual based upon their training and experience and things. And what's suspicious to you may not be suspicious to me, or vice versa, right? And so I think when we start looking at AI, we have to be aware, and this goes with threat assessments, behaviors, and behavioral intervention. It's context, and that's what are we seeing, and can I make a decision off that, or do I need more information, and so forth. So I didn't want to suggest that you guys should be doing this, but I do think when you describe your lane as an inch wide, mile deep, I think that does really play into the ecosystem that's required. No company can do it all by themselves. And they shouldn't be trying, because then you start getting into things that, like you, Chad, described earlier, are a mile wide, an inch deep. And when you start doing everything, then you fall short somewhere. I think that having partners working within their lane and what they do really works much better than trying to get one company that does everything. That being said, there are companies that can connect all of those systems together. And I think that's where Crisis Go really plays well, is the connective tissue to all of these different partners. And I think that's where our partnership really works well. Ethan, you have anything you want to? You've been quiet.
I've been an active listener. I feel like I had a thought before, and now I feel like I lost it. But so basically, one thing I think we should probably touch on is, like, once we start, it's almost like we're when I say we, I say, this industry or whatever. It's like, can AI do this? Can AI do that? And I think they need to make sure they focus on like not allowing AI to take over. AI, we've been kind of talking about AI can only do so much, and it doesn't remove our responsibilities to protect the people that we were responsible for. Right. So like we still have to do that training. We still have to do these drills. And it's like AI is not going to take over. Like it might make your job easier, but you still have to do your job. I think it's like a really important point to make, because I feel like we
is still
like
required.
AI is just like this pretty thing, and we're like, ooh, like this, and it's like, okay, slow down, hold on, like let's make sure you have like the basics first. I want to let's make sure you can actually do all the things you're supposed to do.
Yeah, Ethan, I think it's like mentioned earlier, it's not going to stop all your problems. It's AI is a tool. We just have to figure out how to best use this tool. And I think that you can have all of the solutions out there, and it would be for naught if you didn't train them, train on
Right.
how to do them, understanding what to do with this information, and going back to repetitions of going through that. That's what's going to be able to create. That's what's going to be able to actually effectively respond to problems, I think. I mean, I just look back at the training. I mean, we were in the Navy. It's like it boils back to the most fundamental tasks. I remember we do some scuba stuff, and they go through your emergency procedures. They put you under a bunch of tests. You're very stressed out. You don't have air. And the first thing there's steps of what to do. And you do rep after rep after rep. And it's always the first step, go to air. Then after that, you're checking everything else. So it's no different. I mean, it's such a small example, but it's no different with any of these solutions. I think they have to be practiced. Because at the end of the day, I think, and I've heard this, I don't know where the quote came from. I've heard, I think it's been translated a few times. So I'll just give credit to Michael Scott. But essentially, I think that in crisis, you're typically not going to rise to the occasion. You're going to fall back to your training. So I think all of these tools and all of these solutions utilize AI to be able to help create information, utilize other platforms, other security measures, access control, emergency management systems, your Crisis Go platform, all these communication pieces, but train on them, like practice them, know what to do with this information, because I think that it's all for naught if that training isn't done, and that's always going to be done by a human. That's always us practicing what to do with these solutions.
Yep.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest parts we're missing in school safety is effort. They want to push a button, and they think if I push the button, everything's going to be coming good. We've said this a couple of times. Is that you should practice not to get it right, but until you can't get it wrong, right? And the other side of that is practice makes the complex simple, right? If you understand your processes and you understand, like you said, scuba is there are things that you have to do in this order. And why are they that way? Because you start with what's going to get you out of your problem the quickest, right? And I have to turn on the air. It got bumped, right? Or what have you. Let's see what it is, and if I'm out of air, what do I do next, right? If it's on and something, so I have to check down the pathway for that air and make sure that there's not a broken hose, what have you, right? Then you got to find your buddy, and hopefully he's not swimming off without you. but it is taking and practicing and putting in the effort. We oftentimes we don't have the time, we don't have the money, and we or don't have the expertise. Well, you don't have the expertise because you haven't practiced. You haven't put in the effort. And I think that is when we're talking about AI, again, I can't transfer 34 years of experience and training by AI. We have to look at context. We have to start gaining experience, our own experiences. What does that mean to me in this environment, right? So, yeah, effort. We need more of that.
Where does AI stop for schools? Is there a limit? What do you think is next? Maybe that's a better question.
For me or for you? For the what's next?
Just in general, I think.
I'll let our guests answer that first.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, and that scares me a little bit. I think that we as humans, we're going to constantly find places to utilize technology, and I think in good, I mean, for good and bad. I don't know. I think it's going to continue to evolve as our needs evolve, as we identify places where we can fit this in. And I do think that there needs to be that we need to continue to stress the importance of controlling it and having a human involved in it and using it as a tool rather than a one-stop shop. I think that if we continue to do that, I don't think it'll get ahead of us, because when you ask that question, Ethan, it's like my mind goes in 1,000 different directions as to what the possibilities are out there, and it's seemingly endless. And that's a little bit frightening, especially within schools, privacy, and so it is. I think just stressing the importance of wherever it goes and however it's used, we need to do so with a concern to our privacy, our rights, what the overall solution is, and really have a hand in its use.
Yep.
Not rely on it as a singular solution, but as a tool to a larger solution.
Yeah, I think you guys are definitely it's like you guys are setting a precedent of you have AI, but then it's got some human element to it. So I think you guys are definitely doing it right for sure.
Claude, you want to answer that?
If you just had a gun detection without human verification, I mean, you'd always have that question of, okay, but is it right? It's just a human with that experience, just so much easier to trust. So,
yeah, and Kelly, I would just say checks and balances with robots and AI learning. Now I'm seeing a lot of AI programs that are just teaching as programs. But I think as long as there's checks and balances and control measures in place where the human can point to what's right and wrong, I think that that's going to be key, because you don't want a false umbrella like you're talking about. It takes training. It takes a proactive approach and consistency, and you can't just I think AI run on its own and just off on the side. I think at least now, as the technology sits, that human intervention is key.
Yeah. I like that term, false umbrella, because even if you have an actual umbrella, you still get wet, right? And it just gets you less wet. And I'm going to say this. I think AI it's here to stay. There's the cat's out of that bag. In some aspects, I think I'm going to disagree with Chad a little bit, in that I think we're already behind the curve on this, because we don't understand what we don't see yet, and what's going on, and we don't understand what the politicians are doing or not doing. We don't understand that. So I think that as the end users of AI, I think you have to do it, understand from this context. It's information. That's it. It's information. And information is coming at you at
super
light
fast
speed right now.
Yeah.
And it's gathering based upon how, and they call it, it's AI, artificial intelligence, or machine learning, because the machine has to learn, and depending on how it's set up is how it learns. And from my perspective, it's information coming at you. If you think an emergency where you have shots being fired at your kids in your school building, if you think that is difficult to comprehend, start working with AI coming at you and all of that information that's coming at you at light speed, right? And if you don't understand the fundamentals and you haven't put in the effort, that you're gonna have a difficult time. It's not going when we have these large scale events, and the two incidences that I was part of is that it's coming at, just like the old fire hose being opened up wide open, and it's coming at you, and you got to take what you take, but you can only move that information, that feel information. You can only move out if you don't know if you know what you need, right? And you've put in the effort, and you go, I need that piece of information. I need that piece of information. And,
Yep.
and until we start putting in the effort and working through, and that's working with all of your partners. And we're working with our partners to understand better what it is that they do, so that we can help our schools, our customers. But when we're talking about our partners from the school perspective, we're talking about our parents, we're talking about law enforcement, we're talking about the fire department, we're talking about the ambulances, we're talking about how do we manage district and politics and school boards and all of that, because they're all going to want a piece of this. So you need to understand fundamentally what the purpose, what your objectives are, and how you're going to best achieve that. And sure, AI is going to help give you information quicker, but if you don't know what to do with the information anyway, you're going to have a very difficult time.
Yeah,
AI is your friend.
AI is your friend. Yeah, it's your friend. It's something that I think is also a tool, and I couldn't agree more with Kelly. Your stance on how we should use it and how it needs to be utilized as information, and what we do with that information is paramount. And I think training is a massive part of that. That's why I love what you do, what Crisis Go does. Your guys' investment into school security as a whole. That's the mission. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm at ZeroEyes. So I love what you're doing. I love your conversations. Listen to the one I Love You Guys Foundation, and I think that's just bringing a ton of value. And it's just excited to partner with you guys in this commitment to improving security end to end.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I know that our public, our schools, appreciate what everyone is doing to that end, and but we appreciate what you guys are doing. We appreciate the partnership, and you guys have been fantastic to work with. So love you guys. Yep, and what you do, and thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Ethan. Really appreciate the partnership, and looking forward to continuing to work together.
Yeah. And as always, if there's anything we can do to help, you've got my numbers.
Just give Kelly a call.
Just give Kelly a call.
We'll do.
Don't forget to scan the QR code to subscribe, like, share, all of that fun stuff that you're supposed to do to make us more popular.
I need one.
Super dad.
We'll just Photoshop a logo on Claude's mug.
Yeah. Oh, you can do that. Yeah.
No.
AI. I bet you AI will let you do that.
I mean, if I was better with, those tools, I could do it. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And if you have any questions about what we discussed, leave a comment on our website at crisisgo.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time on Coffee with Kelly, a discussion on school safety.